12 Angry Men is a 1957 film directed by Sidney Lumet that follows a jury of 12 deliberating on the verdict of a young man charged with murder. The film follows what seems to be a cut and dry case, however as new evidence is revealed and old evidence challenged, the true complexities of both the case and the men of the jury are drawn out.
Not guilty.
This video will explore how the film offers an alternative representation of masculinity, and will discuss how it acts to dismantle the hegemonic ideals of manhood.
Nobody's hurt. Right?
But first of all, what is hegemonic masculinity? Hegemonic masculinity is a difficult concept to describe. The concept of hegemony, a notion as slippery and difficult as the notion of masculinity itself. Broadly speaking, hegemonic beliefs are societal held ideas that are reflected by and replicated in media, popular culture and societal institutions that become internalised and normalised by members of that society. Hegemonic masculinity, therefore, is the standardised images of manhood that a culture believes to be normal. As described by Connell and Mettersmint, hegemonic masculinity was not assumed to be normal in the statistical sense, only a minority of men enact it, but it was certainly normative. It embodied the current most honoured way of being a man, and it required all other men to position themselves in relation to it. The hegemonic male, therefore, is the idealised man in a society, the unattainable goal epitomising this most honoured way of being a man. These images of the hegemonic male change and develop from culture to culture, so it's important to situate the idealised representation of masculinity at the time and location of this film, in 1950s America. The 1950s were a time where traditional gender roles were heavily reinforced. The idealised American masculinity of the 1950s can be epitomised by TV family sitcom. Shows like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best depict a well-dressed family man with a 9-to-5. He was a breadwinner, a father, a husband, and his primary concerns were with the well-being of his family and the maintenance of his societal economic standing. The men in 12 Angry Men each have a different relationship to manhood, some aligning closer to the idealised hegemonic male, and some whose expression of manliness differs. The film can be seen to challenge the legitimacy of the hegemonic male by exploring male vulnerability and the importance of a broader, truer representation of one's own manhood.
I'm just saying a coincidence is possible.
And I say it's not possible.
The film 12 Angry Men acts to counter the supremacy of the hegemonic male. This video will analyse 3 ways in which the idea of the hegemonic male is countered in 12 Angry Men. The film's celebration of alternative masculinities, the growth some characters face, and the character trajectory of juror number 3. There are some men in the film whose expression of manliness aligns closer to the idealised hegemonic male. Jurors 3, 7 and 10 are loud-spoken, self-assured men who are used to getting what they want.
The nerve!
All right, listen,
The absolute nerve!
All right.
Their presentation of masculinity is similar to the fathers of the TV family sitcom and of that described by hypermasculinity, portraying an exaggeration and distortion of traditionally masculine traits, such as physical strength, aggression, violence, competition and dominance. Others in the jury have a masculine expression which differs from this ideal, and the film makes an effort to show them as important and valued. Joseph Sweeney's juror number 9, for example, is an old, quiet and gentle man who struggles to stay heard over the more dominant voices in the room.
That man gets on my...
Amber Kinzer writes that he can be seen as a subversion of the traditional masculine archetype. He's not outgoing or assertive or assured. He is, however, vital to the case.
Would you like me to tell you why?
He was the only juror to notice that one of the witnesses' eyesight was poor.
The woman who testified that she saw the killing had those same marks on the sides of her nose. Holy smokes, you know he's right.
And the only juror to be able to identify with the old man on the witness stand.
I think I know this man better than anyone here.
Juror 9 was able to identify vital evidence that would have gone unnoticed if it weren't for his presence in the room.
Well, what about the lawyer? Why didn't he say something?
There are 12 people in here concentrating on this case. 11 of us didn't think of it either.
Through this, the film highlights the importance of a man who strays from the hegemonic ideal. And more so, the film highlights the importance of differing from this ideal more generally. It wasn't despite his differences from the hegemony, but due to them. Due to his age and his empathy, 2 traits that are seen as inferior in the hegemonic ideal of manhood, he was able to influence the trial. Similarly, this can be seen in a number of the other men also. Jack Klugman's juror number 5 and Edward Binns' juror number 6 both stray from the hegemonic ideal due to their working class backgrounds.
Supposing you were the one that was on trial.
Well, I'm not used to supposing. I'm just a working man. My boss does, I suppose.
Michael Kimmel writes that hegemonic masculinity is closely tied to social class. Working class men who often lack the access to economic and cultural capital may be seen as failing to live up to the ideas of hegemonic masculinity. But once again, this distance from the ideal is not something needing to be overcome in order to be useful, but instead provides them with a unique insight into the case. With Juror 6's manual labour job taking him near the L line.
I just finished painting an apartment that overlooked an L line.
Noisy.
Oh, brother.
And Juror 5's exposure to knife crime.
Did you ever see a knife fight? No. You? No? Anybody here ever see a knife fight? Oh, I have.
Led to key evidence being revealed.
Anyone who's ever used a switch knife wouldn't handle it any other way.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
The film celebrates these alternative presentations of masculinity, and in doing so works to dismantle the idea that the only valid form of masculinity is one that closely abides to the hegemony. As the plot of 12 Angry Men progresses, some of the jurors begin to be empowered by the portrayals of manhood out with the hegemony. This can be seen through a number of the men, but perhaps most notably through John Fielder's juror number 2. His character starts as a quiet, unassertive man who frequently gets dismissed or ignored, and by the end of the film, he finds his voice.
Pretty interesting.
I almost fell asleep.
You're a real baseball fan, aren't you, huh?
I mean, somebody saw him do it.
Here's what I think.
Shouldn't we go in order?
They'll get a chance to talk. But be quiet a second, will you? What's interesting about it?
I don't know. I just thought it was interesting.
There are still 11 of us. So much time spent on nothing.
It only takes a second. Come on, knock it off. Now listen, I don't think you have any right to loudmouth.
Know what I mean, my friend? Got those cough drops.
They're all gone, my friend.
Through the unapologetic displays of alternative masculinities from Fonda's number 8 and the other men, juror number 2 grows in confidence and is given a platform to speak out. It's worth pointing out, however, that during juror number 2's transformation, he can be thought as not only growing more confident, but also growing closer to the hegemony. He becomes more forceful, he insults other men, and he seems to lose his trait of putting others before himself. Perhaps this is a failing within the film. It, in part, accidentally acts to uphold the legitimacy of the hegemonic male, in framing his transition towards the hegemony as a positive thing by virtue of itself. Lee J. Cobb's juror number 3 is the last not guilty holdout of the jury.
I don't care whether I'm alone or not.
What do you want? I say he's guilty.
His expression of manhood is perhaps the closest to the hegemony of the time. He represented the authoritarian patriarchal perspective that dominated American society in the 1950s. 3's expression of manhood acts as a parable for hypermasculinity, the distorted exaggeration of the hegemonic ideal. Through the 97-minute runtime, we gradually see the supremacy and ideology of Cobb's character being challenged and subverted, which in turn subverts the form of masculinity that he displays. A photograph that Cobb's character holds carries great importance in tracking this subversion. Near the beginning of the film, juror number 3 talks about the time his son ran away from a fight, so he became determined to
Make a man out of you if I have to break you in two trying.
3 enforced his form of masculinity onto his son in a way that destroyed his relationship with him.
I haven't seen him for 2 years.
Starting confident and assured about himself, his manhood, and his position within the case, he views his actions against his son as correct. However, as more and more evidence is revealed against him, as people begin to challenge him, his worldview is combated. During Juror 3's last stand, members of the jury are filmed from below. Inspired by the noir aesthetic, it invokes imagery of judgment, showing the effect that having his power stripped away from him makes him feel. As his authority slips away, the realisation that he could be wrong creeps in. When reaching for his notes, the photo falls into sight. It acts as a visual aid for the impact of hypermasculinity. A relationship broken by a father determined to enforce his form of manhood onto his son. A relationship broken by an attempt to uphold the hegemonic ideal. Through 3's realisation and subsequent breakdown, the film highlights the destructive nature of hypermasculinity, both on relationships and on the people who wield it.
Not guilty.
As the other jurors leave the room, Henry Fonda's character helps 3 on with his coat. The film once again framing sensitivity and attentiveness as a strength in masculinity as opposed to a weakness, suggesting, perhaps, that the strongest form of masculinity is one that can happily exist out with society's expectations of it. The final scenes have been read by many as a positive ending. As Fonda leaves the courtroom, he gazes up to the newly blue sky. The good guy has won. However, it could be read in a different way. As noted by Bonnie Honig, after Henry Fonda's character leaves the frame, the triumphant music twists into something more menacing. Looking into the background, juror number 3 can be seen leaving the building. The film holds the frame so the audience can see him, ending as he is in centre of the frame, descending the stairs onto the streets below. The film is owned in the end not by the optimistic Henry Fonda, but by the noir undercurrents of pessimism, fatalism, and the menace into which Fonda, too, is locked, whether he knows it or not. In the end, Fonda will help us on with our jacket, but moments later when the music turns dark, we know his care is not the end of the story. The film refuses to give an easy answer to the question of manhood. It also gives no easy solutions to the problems caused by hypermasculinity. The film celebrates alternative masculinities and leaves us with the message that when left unchallenged, hypermasculinity will creep back with dangerous implications. However, when we happily embrace the less hegemonic of our society, lives can be saved.
Not guilty.